Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to everybody. Welcome to these wonderful panelists. We welcome you to the 2024 Annual Conference and Book Fair in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm Kwame Dawes, and I'm a member of the AWP Board of Directors. And I'll give you a visual description of myself. I'm a black man, I'm wearing a hat. I'm also wearing a very attractive scarf, and pretty much in all black, and I wear a pair of glasses. The Association of Writers and Writing Program is a small but mighty nonprofit organization that amplifies the voices of writers and the academic programs and organizations that serve them all while championing diversity and excellence in creative writing. I'm a member of AWP's Board of Directors, but first and foremost, I'm a member of AWP, have been for many, many years. Membership with AWP provides me with writing resources year-round, but just as importantly, it allows me to support other writers, especially those who are just starting out, which is part of my mission in life. My membership dues help writers find meaningful careers and publication opportunities and make services like the Writer-to-Writer Mentorship Program and the AWP HBCU Fellowship Program possible. If you aren't already, I invite you to become a member today. We are delighted to bring you the event today, this event, and I would like to acknowledge and thank all of our conference sponsors and the literary partner hosting this event, MISNA. Our literary partners and sponsors allow AWP to present these extraordinary literary events and helps us keep our conference affordable and accessible. Please join me in thanking all of our conference sponsors and partners for their support and participation. We can applaud them now. Thank you very much. And of course, if you see them, say thank you to them as well. That always is handy. Now, before we start, I do need to do some brief housekeeping things. Please silence your cell phones. Remember, there is no flash photography allowed during the presentation. Respect seats marked as reserved for attendees with accessibility needs. And please give the authors about 10 minutes after the presentation to get to the book signing table before approaching them to have your book signed. And the book signing tables are out in the lobby just beyond these doors. Lastly, we ask that you please be aware of your fellow attendees who may have disabilities and help AWP be more and more accessible. Especially if you see a barrier to accessibility, let us know by calling or texting our accessibility hotline, which is 240-269-6635. Again, 240-269-6635. Please also be aware of those with invisible disabilities and do not question someone's use of an accommodation that they may be taken advantage of. I thank you, and now it's my great pleasure and honor to welcome Lana Barkawi, who will introduce this wonderful and fantastic event. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. It's my true honor to open this event. My name is Lana Barkawi, and I'm the Executive and Artistic Director of MISNA. MISNA, if you don't know us, is a critical platform for contemporary literature, film, art, and cultural production centering the work of Arab and Southwest Asian and North African artists. For 25 years, this is our 25th anniversary. We have been creating a decolonized cultural space to reflect the expansiveness of our community and to foster exchange, examine ideas, and engage audiences in meaningful art. On behalf of MISNA staff and board, I would like to read this statement that our good friends at the Radius of Arab Writers have composed. We would like to acknowledge that we are gathering during an active genocide taking place in Gaza, and that the current violence in Palestine is the continuation of decades of colonial violence under Israeli apartheid. We stand in solidarity with victims of genocide in Sudan and Congo. with those facing dispossession and violence in Armenia, and with the indigenous people whose ancestral homelands this conference is being held, including the Osage, Cow, Missouria, Shawnee, and Wyandot tribes. We stand firmly against anti-Blackness and recognize that police violence and all white supremacist violence must be named and opposed. These forms of violence, along with transphobic violence being legislated in Missouri and other states, endanger the lives of trans, queer, gender nonconforming, and non-binary people. Therefore, as we begin our event, we wish to underscore that none of us are free until all of us are free, and that all anti-racist, liberationist, and decolonial struggles are intertwined. Now it's my absolute pleasure, and actually it's a dream, to be able to host the profound writers Iman Mersal and Noor Naga. Yes, put your hands together for them. And I'm so happy to introduce, right after me, our lovely executive editor, George Abraham, who will tell you more about our authors and hold the event. Thank you so much.
Hey y'all. I guess, is this on? Okay. So it's just such a dream to be here with two authors I really, really love and respect so much. A brief overview, we're gonna do a bilingual reading of both of the poets' work. Iman will be reading in Arabic, Noor will be reading in English. They will be reading each other, and then we're gonna engage in a conversation, and inshallah we'll have an open Q&A afterwards. So get questions ready. I'm going to just introduce them in the order in which they'll read. Iman Mersal is an Egyptian-Canadian writer. Her nonfiction book, Traces of Inayat, received the 2021 Sheikh Zayed Book Award in Literature. Her poetry collection, The Threshold, translated by Robin Creswell, was shortlisted for the Griffin Poetry Prize and won the 2023 National Translation Award. Give it up for Iman. Woo! Noor Naga is an Alexandrian writer who was born in Philadelphia, raised in Dubai, and studied in Toronto, and now lives in Cairo. Her verse novel, Washes Praise, won the Arab American Book Award and the Pat Lothar Memorial Award. Her debut novel, If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English, which is one of the best novels I've ever read in my entire life. Yeah, I know there's snaps. Won the Grey Wolf Press Africa Prize and the Center of Fiction's First Novel Prize, and was a Gene Stein Book Award finalist, among other honors. Her work has been published in Guernica, Lit Hub, Poetry, Bomb, The Walrus, The Common, The Offing, and so many more. Please join me in welcoming our amazing artists. All right. Yes, Iman, you can take it away.
Hello, everybody. I read 3 poems from Until Giving Up the Idea of Home, which was published in Arabic 2013, and it's included in The Threshold. الشر. كنت أظن أن هناك شرًا كثيرًا في العالم، فرغم أنني أكثر أصدقائي حناناً، لم أرى وردة على مائدة إلا وطحنت طرفها بين الإبهام والسبابة لأتأكد أنها ليست من البلاستيك. مؤخراً بدأت أشك في وجود الشر أصلاً، كأن الأذى كله يكون قد حدث بالفعل في اللحظة التي نتأكد فيها أن الكائنات التي أدميناها كانت حقيقية.
I'll be reading the translation. Evil. I used to believe there was so much evil in the world. And though I'm the gentlest of all my friends, I never saw a rose in a vase without pinching the petals between my thumb and index finger to make sure it wasn't plastic. But lately, I've begun to doubt the existence of evil altogether, as if all the hurt in the world happens at the moment we make sure that the creatures we've made to bleed are real.
قرر رجل أن يفسر الحب لي. قرر رجل أن يفسر الحب لي. كان يدخل آخر زر في قميصه بينما العتمة تتزحزح إلى الركن والظهيرة تعبر للجهة الأخرى. توهان ما كتلك اللحظة التي تظلم فيها الشاشة حيث يكون على المتفرج البحث عن باب الخروج من السينما. هكذا قرر رجل أن يفسر الحب لي بنظارة أحكم وضعها خلف أذنيه. كانت الغرفة مشوشة وصافية عندما قال الحب هو البحث عن. فتحت عيني لأرى فلولا من الأسبان يبحثون عن الذهب في شيلي. كانوا جوعى وخائب الرجاء بينما كان هندي أحمر مختبئا من الذعر خلف صخرة. وعندما قال الحب هو الرضا بي بدأت أتحسس بأصابعي جبلا من الشوكولاتة السوداء وأستمع إلى إلا فيتزجيرد تغني وهو السعادة. عندها لم أتخيل شيئا على الإطلاق. لابد أنني لم أره بعدها أبدا. لا أتذكر أنني سألته إذا كان الحب هو أن ينسى ساعته بجانب السرير.
A man decides to explain to me what love is. One day, a man decided to explain to me what love is. He was buttoning up his shirt while shadows gathered in the corners and the afternoon light crossed from one side of the room to the other. He seemed only half there, as when the screen dims and everyone in the movie theater starts looking for exit signs. It was then, glasses tidily fixed around the backs of his ears, that he decided to explain to me what love is. In the half-lit room, he murmured, "Love is actually a quest for..." I opened my eyes and saw a band of conquistadors searching for gold in remotest Chile, hungry and dejected, while an Indian crouched behind a rock in fear. And when he said, love is being truly content with," I began to hear the voice of Ella Fitzgerald and pressed my fingers into a mound of black chocolate. And when he said, "It is a happiness which," well, I really couldn't imagine anything at all. I'm not sure I saw that man again because I never got to ask him if love is forgetting one's watch by the bedside.
My last poem. فكرة البيوت. بعت أقراطي في محل الذهب لأشتري خاتماً من سوق الفضة. استبدلته بحبر قديم وكراسة أسودة. حدث ذلك قبل أن أنسى الصفحات على مقعد قطار كان من المفروض أن يوصلني إلى البيت. وكان كلما وصلت إلى مدينة بدا لي أن بيتي في مدينة أخرى. تقول أولغا من دون أن أحكي لها ما سبق: البيت لا يصبح بيتاً إلى لحظة بيعه. تكتشف احتمالات حديقته وغرفه الواسعة في عيون السمسار. تحتفظ بكوابيسك تحت السقف نفسه لنفسك، وسيكون عليك أن تخرج بها في حقيبة أو اثنتين على أحسن الفروض. أولغا تصمت فجأة ثم تبتسم مثل ملكة تتباسط مع رعاياها بين ماكينة القهوة في مطبخها وشباك يطل على زهور. زوج أولغا لم يرى مشهد الملكة، وربما لهذا لا يزال يظن أن البيت هو الصديق الوفي عندما يصبح أعمى. أركانه تحفظ خطواته وسلماته ستحميه برحمتها من السقوط في العتمة. أبحث عن مفتاح يضيع دائما في قعر الحقيبة، حيث لا تراني أولغا ولا زوجها، حيث أتدرب في الحقيقة حتى أتخلى عن فكرة البيوت. كل مرة تعود إليه وتراب العالم على أطراف أصابعك تحشر ما استطعت حمله في خزائنه. مع ذلك ترفض أن تعرف البيت بأنه مستقبل الكراكيب، حيث أشياء ميتة كانت قد بدت في لحظة ما تفاوضاً مع الأمل. ليكن البيت هو المكان الذي لا تلاحظ البتة إضاءته السيئة، جدار تتسع شروخه حتى تظنها يوماً بديلاً للأبواب.
The idea of home. I sold my earrings at the gold store to buy a silver ring in the market. I swapped that for old ink and a black notebook. This was before I forgot my pages on the seat of a train that was supposed to take me home. Whenever I arrive in a city, I felt my home was in a different one. Olga says, without my having told her any of this, your home is never really home until you sell it. Then you discover all the things you could do with the garden and the large rooms, like you're seeing it through the eyes of a broker. You stored all your nightmares in the attic. Now you have to pack them in a suitcase or two. Olga falls silent, then suddenly smiles, a monarch among her subjects, there in the kitchen between her coffee machine and a window with a view of flowers. Olga's husband wasn't there to witness this queenly speech. Maybe this is why he still thinks the house will be a loyal friend when he loses his sight. A house whose foundations will hold him steady, whose stairs will mercifully protect him from falls in the dark. I'm digging around for a key that always gets lost in the bottom of my handbag, here, where neither Olga nor her husband can see me, training myself in reality so I can give up the idea of home. Every time you go back home with the dirt of the world under your nails, you stuff everything you could carry with you into its closets. But you refuse to define home as the future of junk, a place where dead things were once confused with hope. Let home be that place where you never notice the bad lighting. Let it be a wall whose cracks keep growing until one day you take them for doors. Thank you. Such an honor to read these translations. I'm going to read a short excerpt from the middle section of Wash's praise. Basmala. Of Mansur ibn Ammar, they say the reason for his repentance is that he found one day a piece of paper with the Basmala written on it. In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. He picked it up, and unable to find a suitable place to put it, he ate it. If Mansur found the paper, Mansur found the paper because God willed Mansur to find the paper which had his name on it. If Mansur did not find a place to put it, Mansur did not find a place to put it because God willed Mansur not to find a suitable place to put it. If Mansur ate the paper, Mansur ate the paper because God willed Mansur to eat the paper which had his name on it. The question, what is a suitable place to put God, is not the question. The question is, how did God get out in the first place? Answer, he left with the wow. If all the wares have skies, my God, and all the skies have hows, and all the hows beg a who, my God, it is not even raining. Most days a blue's too blue. How to live beneath what I do and do nothing but walk with a face of weather, the very upness of the air absurd. Based on what you whispered, that you whisper in my jugular vein, I can only conclude, you are the iron in me. You are the iron in me. With the eye, as with all fair questions, what goes out must come back in. Are there undressed trees in each of my lungs or is it the sky that's breathing? I have seen the body in diagrams and would not have believed them, had I not also seen, from a plane 6 years ago, the rivers at my sickly wrists. Had I not seen the hairy toes of trees that are the teeth of trees, had I not noticed the lightning veins of leaves when a storm cuts power in the city. The wind whips its hair, takes down the moon. The glass of shops think fractured thoughts. The streets jingle with thieves. Wherever I go, strangers around me stop. They start to look up, too. It is what Cuckoo calls a quorum-like response. Cuckoo studies brains. She says brains are peach seeds. Brains have trees inside them, too. He speaks to me in pattern.
بسملة. أما فبمنصور بن عمار يقولون في سبب توبته إنه قد عثر على رقعة مكتوبة عليها البسملة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. التقطها ولأنه لم يجد لها موضع أكلها. إذن عثر على الرقعة منصور، فعثر على الرقعة منصور، لأن إرادة الله أن يعثر على الرقعة منصور. إذن لم يجد لها موضع منصور، إذن لم يجد لها موضعا منصور، فلم يجد لها موضعا منصور، لأن إرادة الله ألا يجد لها موضعا مناسب. إذا أكل الرقعة منصور فأكل الرقعة منصور، لأن إرادة الله أن يأكل الرقعة منصور التي حملت اسمه. سؤال: ما هو الموضع المناسب لله؟ ليس السؤال، السؤال هو كيف خرج الله أساساً. الجواب: غادر بالياء. وإذا كان لكل الأينات سماوات فلربي ولكل السماوات كيفات، وكل الكيفات تستجلب من ربي إنه لا يمطر حتى. في غالب الأيام الأزرق أزرق فوق اللازم. كيف أعيش تحت ما أفعله وأفعل؟ لا شيء سوى السير بوجه جو. علو الهواء ذاته لا يعقل. حسب ما همست لي أنك تهمس في وريد الوداجي، فما لي إلا أن أستنتج إنك الحديد فيا، إنك الحديد فيا. بالعين كما بكل الأسئلة العادلة لا بد من ما يخرج أن يعود. هل هناك أشجار عارية في رئتي، أم السماء هي ما يتنفس؟ قد رأيت الجسد في رسم بياني ولم أكن لأصدقهم. لو لم أرى أيضا من طيارة قبل 6 سنوات الأنهار في معصمي الواهنين. لو لم أرى أصابع قدم مشعرة لأشجار هي أسنان الأشجار. لو لم ألاحظ عروق البروق لأوراق الشجر عندما تقطع عاصفة الكهرباء في المدينة. الرياح يصوت بشعره ينزل القمر زجاج الدكاكين تفكر أفكارا مشروخة. الشوارع ترن بلصوص أينما أذهب غرباء حولي. قف، فهم ينظرون فوقا أيضا. ها هو ما تسميه كوكو رد كالنصاب القانوني. كوكو تستقر الأمخاخ وتقول إن الأمخاخ بذور خوخ، وأيضا للأمخاخ أشجار بداخلها. يحدثني عن نمط.
And those last pieces were translated by our own Mizna editor, Noor Aldin Hussein, who's here in the audience. So give him a round of applause. Amazing. Thank you both for this. So I guess maybe we can start with a question of place, right? So like, it's really funny, we were talking before this about how both of you all are Egyptian writers who are also happen to be based in Canada right now, and you both write in Arabic for Iman and predominantly English for Noor, and exist within both of these similar places and between both of these places. So maybe I'd love to hear you guys talk more about how language is like shapes your writing practice across, between Kahira and between the West, and more just about your thoughts on writing in both of these languages in both of these respective places.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, it's such an amazing kind of coincidence that we can have this conversation, because there are so many parallels, and yet we're kind of coming from opposite ends of these two languages. I think that as the last kind of 4 months have sort of made really clear, there are different rules when you're operating in each of these languages. Different assumptions that you can make about who's on the other end, who's receiving, who's reading, who's listening. And because of that, because of sort of who the imagined audience could be, there are different approaches that you have to take. You don't speak in Arabic in the way that you speak in English. And you can't write, I think, in each of these languages in the same way. There are different kind of risks, different protections, there's different work. So as somebody who writes in English and somebody who publishes in North America, then I'm sort of forced to grapple with advocacy work, with sort of what does it mean for my texts to do good in these spaces? How can I sort of advocate on behalf of different communities? So this is kind of, I think, where a lot of post-9/11 Arab American writing has come from. It's about, we are human, we are like you, we are similar, all of this kind of stuff, which I think, lots of people have spoken about as sort of doing a huge disservice to the actual writing, because it's sort of cornering you and also forcing you to center an other that, you're in this kind of, you're in this combat with an other that like fundamentally doesn't see you as fully human, and so you're constantly arguing, no, I am human, look at all this evidence. And it's just such a boring, exhausting, uninteresting place to be. So I think as somebody who writes in English, I've been trying to experiment kind of, at least with the last few books, with, what does it mean to just ignore that altogether? What does it mean to kind of speak to just operate under the assumption that, I don't know, we're all human? I don't know, like a basic kind of equality? Radical, right? Like,
or even like the violence of the notion of human too, capital H, human,
Yeah.
the Western notion of, that was built on the annihilation of Black people and the subjugation and slavery and et cetera. There's a lot of these threads of, anywho, not to get into post-human territory, but yeah.
But yeah. So I'm sort of, have been trying to find ways to sort of, just not engage with that project of educating,
Right.
and to sort of, because when we sort of imagine who is an English, who is a reader or who is a listener to the English language, there's also, all of us and people in the room. So I've been trying to find different ways of privileging different readers and speakers of English. But anyways, I'm curious to hear what it's like, Iman, to be writing in Arabic with all of the sort of privacy that comes with that language.
All right. So writing in Arabic just to distinguish between writing in Arabic, the relation with the language, and being a writer in the West. I usually distinguish between them. So, so the question usually is, why do you write in this language or that? And usually writers would talk about writing in the mother tongue. I really doubt that there is such a thing as mother tongue, because this language, which is the first language usually, even if we dream with, if we think, and if we know the memory of this language more than others, it's still not really your own. Other people are writing in it, speaking it, and this is what makes writing very interesting, because you are using the languages that everyone around you is using, and trying to put your intention in it, trying to make it your own. So this is a struggle with language, even if it's your mother tongue or first language, is what defines writing, because writing is really about this relation with language that can shape anything, shape feeling or ideas or images. But being a writer in the West, writing in Arabic, I mean, living in a speaking English environment where writing in Arabic is a funny part in all of this, because if you put aside the invisibility of it, like, it's a secret language here. It's not private. It's really secret. So you might see a friend, a fellow writer who writes in English, and he can read to you right away or share with you his or her poem, while you will not do this for another 4 years until this work is translated into English, right? So you can't sit and translate it to someone. So all the time it's a secret, meaning you are writing something that no one knows about. And if you want to share an idea about it, it will look just funny and out of place. So this is my experience with this part. But you mentioned last 4 months, and these last 4 months are important when we talk about the position of an Arab writer in North America now, in particular. Not in particular, really, in Germany, in France. So, but we know about North America more. I feel like I myself lived in the West for so many years, trying to protect myself from being a representative of anything. Muslim women, women of color, oppressed women in the Middle East, whatever, people come to you with label and you either accept it or refuse it, and I used usually to refuse it. But last 4 months, something is very confusing for me, and I really don't know what will happen after, because you find yourself, yes, you are not representative of Arabs or Palestinians or blah, 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 but when you express your solidarity, you put in a particular position right away, even if you are not speaking from the position of a representative. And this is what makes me so nervous sometimes. It's like solidarity itself is a label as well in some historical moment, in some environments, and you will not say how you feel and then say, oh, I'm not representative. It doesn't make sense, right? So you are putting again in a place you didn't choose just because of what you believe in.
Yeah, I think what I was thinking about with regards to privacy, and what I'm kind of hearing a little bit from you about your position in Canada or in North America, is I was thinking about how if you're writing in Arabic, or even if you're speaking to someone in Arabic, then I can make certain assumptions about your political orientation to what's happening in Palestine.
Right.
I don't need to do the sort of bracketing, and I don't have to do any contextualizing. I can just speak freely. And I was struck, I was in Cairo for the winter break for a month and a half, and I was struck actually by how much everyone is grieving, and no one needs to talk about it, actually. There was no political conversation, nothing. Whereas I realized while I was there that I was dreading coming back to Toronto, actively dreading it. And then when I was sort of on the plane and en route, and once I arrived, I realized that all of the mounting dread was, now we gotta do this again. We gotta do this again. You know, I have to sort of think about every conversation. I have to think about what I'm wearing in the classroom, what I'm saying with my colleagues, and it's just sort of exhausting that I really was feeling I am on the front lines with my Twitter. It's just me and some Zionist who I've never met, whereas in the Arab world and in the Arabic language, there's just such a, it's not a question. I don't even know what the language would be like to have that conversation because it's so unnecessary. Yeah.
I guess what I'm hearing too in both of these answers is like, where can we find a space in language where we don't need explanation, where we don't need, I guess, explanation in a pandering or education, hashtag awareness, whatever, sense, right? We want to talk about it. But also holding responsibility as well, because that's also what I'm hearing too, is positions in the West, how can we translate privilege and whatnot into responsibility, into action, right? That's, I think, a lot of where the conversations are going, in our communities in the West. And so, yeah, I guess, because it's so easy to just be like, oh, I am blah, and here you're already, as Aman saying, that's giving you propping you up on some pedestal, perhaps, that maybe, you don't necessarily, need, or, it's also just immediately boxing us in, right? And forcing us sometimes, depending on our institutional setting or whatnot, into some place of, some constraint of language where we have to explain, we have to always be on the defensive, we have to always be, ready to fight for our lives, because again, as even just the last few days have shown, there are just some times where certain spaces do not want to even say the word Palestine. The word Palestine enough is there's a target on your back already,
Well, I'm thinking really that even inside solidarity, we don't feel comfortable all the time. So to note that you feel this tension when you are clarifying your position because of the language you are using with others, with, for example, someone who is Zionist or having different problem. It's even inside your community, and even talking in Arabic language about the Palestinian issue. And I'll give you some examples because it might make it clear. So sometimes you are discussing whatever is going on, and I would express my disappointment at university, at the universities, Western, academic institutions, that it's almost the whole thing about decolonization became almost performative language. Any social science paper, undergrad, grad, whatever, you have to say something. If it's not Edward Said, it's Spivak. If it's not Homi Baba, we have literature that is handy, and you just bring the book from the shelf, cite it, you are safe. And when you come to the real event or a big event, you see that this language is changing, and it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that you are talking about, colonialism or post-colonial or decolonizing or blah, 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 that you will really see whatever going on. So to sum this, I'm thinking that solidarity is actually a very complicated business, because human suffering is taking place all the time. If you look in any given moment, on the map, you will find some people somewhere fighting for their freedom, facing, oppression under dictatorship, imprisoned, not able, don't have the right for mobility to move from one place to another, and it goes on and on and on. So the complexity of solidarity is, while suffering is common, actually solidarity is the exception, not suffering. So when you decide to raise your voice in solidarity with, this is when the whole positionality issue started to show. Because I'm in solidarity with people in Sudan, and people in Libya, in Yemen, in China, in blah, blah, blah. But why I'm so hurt with the Palestinian, because of the Palestinian, the apartheid or the genocide about them, it's me, it's a history, it's a knowledge, it's language. There are so many things that together would make you raise your voice in solidarity with Palestinian, but you don't, walk up every day to raise your solidarity with, let's say, another people somewhere else. And this is what really I'm interested to understand now more than anything. Instead of complaining about, Zionists or people who would harass you as soon as you even share a post or a tweet about whatever going on in Palestine, I need to reflect and understand what does it mean to be in solidarity with. So.
Yeah. I think I've also been living a similar question when I realized that I have the space, actually, and the time to show up for multiple protests a week, to organize in my free time. There was such an energy, and I also started thinking, hold on a second.
Why is this?
Why now? Yeah. Why didn't I have this energy with all the other conflicts? Was it just because they weren't close enough to me? It was just slightly far. I mean, I do think there are things about Palestine that are exceptional, just in terms of
75 years, for example,
but also the propaganda.
Worse than in 2024, a live streamed genocide. It's like
It's
that
just
is
unbelievable.
exceptional.
Yeah.
But not to exceptionalize Palestine writ large. But this case, this exact moment is exceptional. But this is something I'm thinking about too, though. How many people were truly plugged into solidarity with Sudan before this moment? Truly, myself included, all, and right, and how are, I think this is not to interrupt, but this is exactly like the question I'm asking.
Yeah.
Too,
Yeah, and also another thing that you were bringing up, Iman, is sort of, you brought up the example of, for example, some academics or colleagues of yours who use post-colonial language, and the entire institution, all of these institutions are so big on decolonialize, and we're post-colonial, and land acknowledgements at every, really, it's amazing. So I think there's also this question of, what does solidarity look like, and as what does it look like in language? I mean, these are people who use the language actively, who profit off of the language, who have entire careers based on using this language effectively in a sort of intelligent way, being able to market themselves as experts on, And then when it comes to moments where they are then asked to perform, to actually live up to the politics, there's silence.
Yeah.
Because I think really, I don't know. You know what? Seriously, and this might be funny. Before this 4 months, I was so sick of this language myself.
Yeah.
I just stopped believing in it. I looked at it as a performative tool to be ahead in academia or in social science in particular, and to have a label that can protect you sometimes, like certain label of identity. and then it's comfortable zone to speak from within. So when you see, for example, land acknowledgement, before every meeting at university, if you don't know, you will hear this land acknowledgement. But actually, the same person who does this doesn't think about, for example, Palestinian as indigenous people. So it's very simple. So it's as if this is very comfortable and safe to do before an academic event, and then you feel, you did your best.
Right.
I mean, my duty to human being. And then when it comes to the questions of land, it's completely different. So I don't have an answer, but it's just something that I think it bugs all of us, and now more than ever to see it.
Yeah. Well, I think with land acknowledgements, I mean, what you're noting and what I often think about also is that the land acknowledgement stands as a replacement to land back.
Exactly.
We don't give the land back, we just acknowledge that it was taken, and then,
Right.
yeah.
Translating again position into responsibility. Land acknowledgement is a position. It's is saying this is our position and we acknowledge. But like, I think of the horror story of like, let's flash forward to a dystopian future of like, are there going to be Israeli universities being like, we acknowledge in 150 years from now, we acknowledge that this was land dispossessed by the Palestinian people. Like, it just makes me sick to my stomach. I just really, and like, how can we fight colonization in the now? What is the now, and like, what are the immediate needs, right? But there's also this question too that I think this conversation is circling around about like, okay, we're poets, right? We're writers at the Association of Writers of Writing Program, blah, 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 right? Whatever the fuck this is, conference, right? And, we put words out into the world and as a job, and then institutions take these words and do things with them. Some of these people who are saying, oh my God, Edward Said was the first person that made me feel seen and represented when I was in grad school. Then they don't even say like Palestine or Gaza or anything. And I'm like, how brain rotted do you have to be like, maybe, just maybe something about Edward Said's Palestinian lived history, maybe that affected how someone can go and look into the canon and theorize Orientalism. Maybe, let's do some connecting the dots, right? But so like institutions love to take our words and do with it what they will for their own preservation, right? So what are we thinking about, like, in our conversations before this too, like, what the fuck is the role of poetry right now? How are we being used by institutions, and what is it like we can do as artists, or maybe as us beyond our artistry, right? In response to this, because I mean, I don't know about this, but I'll just speak for myself. I've been feeling used lately by institutions. And it's not just one, it's all of them, right? Yeah, I'm just wondering, yeah, anyways, I'll stop there, but yeah, like what do we do with how our work is used, here, and maybe even also, back in Egypt or in Palestine, and I got to see Mona's translation of Octavia Butler in Beirut bookstores when I was there this past summer, and just I'm like seeing like literature, in back in our homelands and whatnot, right? How do we like address how our work is being used?
I really think I'm not the best person to answer this question, but I can just say, looking at Arabic poetry during 20th century, it was really mainly, there are love poems and poems about historical experience, but it was really also poetry that full of ideology. And because maybe myself and even my generation as young poets, we were absolutely against this, questioning the idea of the role of the poet in the world, and opposing the idea of prophecy in poetry. So the poet is not the leader of the nation, is not the one who would free the land or improve people's life or free women or whatever. Poetry, I think, works on us differently. Literature in general, it doesn't call for revolution tomorrow, but it calls for changing ourselves somehow, the way we see the world or whatever. And I'm actually, I'm not thinking that this will change. So the role of my writing will not change. But the awareness about your position as a writer, an Arab writer in the West, is actually, it's not even changing, but there is more awareness of it. Like seriously, last few months, I was invited to some readings that I canceled. I just didn't feel comfortable to go to be invited by someone whom I'm not sure what do they think about this. And it's very rare for me to think this way, but why not? If this will make you feel comfortable just until you reposition your understanding of what's going on, it's fine. Just maybe silence will be also an option, because you can't keep talking to people in Arabic and in University of Alberta and online about the same thing. Maybe one needs sometimes also to just shut up, because I am repeating something and it's so boring, right? And I'm repeating something that it's not even my own, because it's not like every one of us create his or her own language about what's going on. We are actually, it's a free language. It's around, so we are using it to express ourselves. And it's not even comfortable to do so, because when you hear yourself, sometimes you feel this is weird. I'm talking like the 60s writer generation in Egypt that I listened to early 90s. So is it age or what? What's going on with me? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I'm trying to say is, in terms of writing, whatever impact writing, we don't really know. It will show up one day. Someone will recognize it later. But as individuals who live here, I think there is some responsibility now. And one can't say, I don't care.
Yeah, I think you're really asking two questions, and Iman is answering two answers. There's the question of what do you write and what is the role of poetry, and there's many kind of theories floating around at the moment. So, from Rasha Abdel Hadi's poetry is you take whatever you can and you throw it at the machine of empire and you try to stop. There's Hala Alien's position, which is no, poetry doesn't replace the work of activism, but it's a way of resting. It's a way of resting in community and solidarity. It's a way of healing yourself. There's many, and then there's the sort of obvious, poetry as witness, poetry as archive, poetry as documenting. We have to write about these things. We have to make sure that the next generations know. We have to pass it down, the sort of genealogical lines, so that our children and our grandchildren will know what it was like. But then there's also the question, Iman, of what you were saying, which is as a public figure, what do you do? How do you get used? How does your work get used? How does your identity or positionality get used? And I think that every time I start to think that these tiny moves that I do in the public sphere don't matter, someone comes and shows me that they do. So I was invited by what turned out to be a very Zionist colleague to do a reading, and I couldn't get out of it, and it was in November, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna go. And I wore my kufiyya, and I did a reverse land acknowledgement and did a whole thing was just like, we're gonna, if you invited me here, we're gonna do this.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, that's what you signed up for.
That's what you signed up for.
Yeah.
And I was so sort of unsure, and when I looked up from the reading, there was one girl at the back of the room in a kufaya looking at me, and I was like, it is for you that I did this, and I didn't even know, but you have showed me this was the right thing to do. And there was another moment where the same colleague sort of was harassing me really through emails referencing my Twitter, and I was like, you know, and then after a while you feel, you know, I'm just like screaming into the void, what is even the point of this? Anyone that I'm talking to surely already knows. Am I just like a machine that is trying to churn out evidence?
Right.
And then I got a message from someone I don't know who said, I read your book and I followed you on Twitter, and thank you for tweeting about Palestine. I had no idea. I had no idea. And I was like, now I can't stop. Like, now we gotta just keep doing this. You know, I was like, there's like, every time I start to get a little bit cynical or start to feel maybe what I'm doing is not doing anything. I go to the protest and I see a student there and they come up to me and they say, you're here? And I'm like, all right, here, I'm here. I will have to keep being here because you need me here, and fine, we're all gonna just keep doing this for as long as we can. Yeah.
It's just, wow, like, wow. I'm also just flashing back to your Arab American National Museum speech, and yeah, chills. And just, I don't know. I mean, this is the thing too. This is a thing that I've been talking to many friends about the past few days, of how there is an urgency of the actions right now. We need to throw ourselves into the empire death machine, cog it up, you know, like the people like in Yemen that are just delaying the shipments. We need that kind of insurgent action, and at the same time, there's a slow time scale I'm hearing in all of these like really thoughtful responses of like, how do we do the slow, difficult work, the self-work, the communal work, the repair work, right? How do we, you know, and these things need to happen simultaneously, you know? And there's some poetry, there are some ways in which poetry is that kind of slow self-work, right? And then there are some ways where it's like, no, Rifat al-Arir, if I must die, you know, I was reading that poem for our anthology years ago, and this is where we are, you know. For folks who don't, I'm assuming everyone in the room knows the martyred poet slaughtered by the Zionist regime, targeted by Israeli intelligence, specifically Rifat al-Arir, very outspoken Ghazan poet and intellectual, Allah yarhamu. And there's some times where it's just, we're devastatingly reminded of like, what does it mean for the poem itself to be thrown into the death machine? And what does it mean for the poem itself? Like, there's something that like, it's not gonna stop the bombs, it's not gonna stop the bullet, but there is something like, there is a way that we can, you know, act with the poems and alongside and through the poems. Like, for example, I think Rasha Abdul Hadi, who you invoked, has done this thing where they start inserting the bio, the artist's bio, which I like challenge everyone to do. What would it mean for you to, instead of a list of accomplishments as your artist bio, say George Abraham is wants you as a reader to go and throw yourself into the death machine and stop the bombs in Gaza right now. These are direct links and these are direct things you can do. What does it mean to take over the space of, you know, the literary institution? What does it mean to say, no, business cannot be as usual, and implicate yourself and your work, I guess, right? In the, like it's kind of like a both and, I don't know. I guess I'm getting a lot of simultaneity from this conversation, that we need to be doing this simultaneous work, and that's hard. Let's just fucking say it, that's hard. That's a process where we need to check in on ourselves and with each other and on each other, right? And care. Mm-hmm. And we're in this for the long haul, y'all. I don't know, like every day I'm just reminded of how, you know, cool, we're gonna get a ceasefire eventually. what is what is the next? What is the next? You know, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think the question that you're asking is also how do we, you know, if we are practicing BDS, if we're practicing divesting, what does that look like in the literary industry?
Right.
You know, and actually we've had all kinds of movements from colonizing the biospace to people raising a lot of hell because different publications, I'm thinking of The New Yorker, I'm thinking of Poetry Magazine, I'm thinking of all of these spaces that have been, that have really failed and horrified us, and there has been such a movement of poets in particular, you know, going to social media and saying, guys, we need to divest from these guys. These guys are not safe. These guys do not represent us. And it's interesting to me that it's been primarily poets, more so than fiction writers, far more than nonfiction writers. And I think that, exactly. We make no money. We have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, sorry, must be nice with your $200,000 advance for your, like, you know, white woman beach club novel, like, or whatever. Like, you know, anyways. Sorry to novelists. They're great novelists. Here are two of them. But I don't know if you identify as a novelist, Iman, but.
I know. Ever.
But I think so. We time-wise, I believe we have 10 minutes left, according to the. Can I get a thumbs up for that? Or okay, great. So maybe we can turn to some audience, you know, Q&A, if that's possible. If I'm not sure where the mic situation is, but what's gonna happen is, please keep the questions like very brief and in a way that I can summarize back for accessibility purposes to the space. And Lana here is going to be going off and giving the mic.
Hi, thank you all so much for this panel. I wanted to ask about, we've talked about the role of the poem in, you know, just throwing it into the machine, as you said. I'm wondering about the role of the poem and writing, in particular in this moment, in terms of pan-Arab solidarity, in terms of critiquing the Arab governments, and all of that kind of question. I think as often as I see Palestinians in Gaza critiquing America and Joe Biden, you know, they're also, you know, وين الدولة العربية, you know, so I'm just wondering, like, how can we use writing as a tool to, like, address that beast as well?
For accessibility purposes, I'll repeat the question, and for the video and live stream of how, like, a lot of Arabs are using poetry to critique Western governments, but how can we also critique our own, you know, Arab governments back in the region as well? With, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do feel you'll probably have more to say because, you know, writing in English, in a way, I'm completely protected. At least insofar as I don't have to worry about the Egyptian government coming after me, and especially if I'm writing poetry, you know. But if you're writing in Arabic, I would imagine it would be much more. I mean, nobody reads poetry anyway, so probably you'd be okay, and you know. But I don't know.
I think I will take the question, you know, I understood it differently, so I don't think any writer can decide the rule of whatever he is writing. The idea that you know or you understand more than your reader is wrong idea, or I don't believe in it to begin with. So I don't write something to educate people. It's actually about communication. And this communication is about whatever, and whatever will be actually just usually, will be enlightening when you talk about oppression or occupation or what, even if you don't talk about occupation or land or so I feel literature works differently and don't have a goal of educating people through a poem. Never, I never had.
Yeah. I think also poetry that masquerades as activism, or activism that masquerades as poetry, is usually not very good poetry. I mean, there's activism outside,
Yep.
and that's one thing, but poetry that's like, we are humans, stop killing us, is not interesting at all. So they're kind of separate things.
And I can't help it, but I have to joke here that there are lots of very bad Palestinian poetry. It's true. I mean, it's absolutely true. And this bad poetry, it's honest. It expresses people's experience, but it doesn't mean that will do anything to the individual reader or to freeing the land.
To quote Murid Barghouti, Allah yarhamu, what Palestine does not need right now is a bad poem.
Yes, exactly.
All right, thank you so much. Noor, you mentioned like that you got so sick of trying to constantly prove that you're human to the West over and over in your writing, and you mentioned something I'm really interested in these days, which is alienating, like intentionally alienating a particular kind of reader and not allowing them access into the text. And I'm wondering, how does that look like tangibly in your writing practice? Like, what did you used to do that you think you're not going to keep doing anymore in order to execute that kind of alienation in your writing? Yeah.
Do you need to repeat that?
It's the great question from Gandhi of how to, like, in terms of the whole not educating the reader, like that unlearning process, what did that look like within Noor's work, I think is the summary.
Right. Well. So I didn't actually start off by doing that work. It was more so reading Arab American or Arab Anglophone texts for whom that was their project, and my sort of writing practice evolved in response to it. I was very much like, I don't want to do that, because when I read these texts that are written by people like me, they're not talking to me. And similarly to the bad poetry, I really just think it makes for bad fiction to have this like agenda, especially when the agenda is so simple and stupid. Like, We Are Human is a really stupid thing to have to spend a whole novel reading, you know? It's just, yeah. So, but I think your question was more so about, I mean, it's complicated because the way that the publishing industry in North America works, or in English works, is that you need people to find your work relatable in order to sell it. So part of the negotiation that you're making is when you decide not to do the work of, you know, putting in the explanations and the footnotes and really clarifying things and having a dear white reader in the in-between, you are losing, you are kind of taking some risks that could mean the book doesn't get published, could mean the book gets really severely edited in a direction you don't like. And yeah, it does have consequences, but I think, yeah, I think personally I was in a position where I didn't have to worry about that so much. I understand other people might be in different financial situations, and you know, there's always kind of a negotiation that you have to make. So I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, and for anyone who's really interested in footnotes, the best footnote in a novel example I've seen was if an Egyptian cannot speak English. I will not say any more for spoilers. Check it out, section 2. Mwahaha. I think this will be our last question over here from Lena.
Thank you both for your work and for the conversation. I want to say a small thing since we've spoken it into the room, and I want to ask. The thing I just want to add, even though it's maybe not related to literature, but we're kind of talking around it, is this, you know, the issue of solidarity and the complexity of solidarities. For me, I think the unique point about solidarity with Palestinians in the United States is more about the United States' relationship with Israel. It's not because Palestinians deserve from us, because of our affinity, more solidarity than people in Sudan or Congo or anywhere else. It's because, you know, I'll use Columbia University as an example. They have agents of both the Israeli and the American state constantly masquerading as educators there, while students at Columbia are being attacked with chemical agents by former Israeli soldiers who are still allowed on campus. So this is a unique situation, and our complicity as people living in the United States is specific in this case. So it's beyond solidarity. It's an obligation because we are participating in causing harm when we're silent. So I just wanted to make sure we speak that into the room. My question is not about politics, though. It's wanting to learn from you about your new work and what you're thinking about now and what you're working on now, if you feel comfortable sharing.
That's a great ending question.
What are we working on now?
Yeah.
I can tell you. So I have been working on a book about Baghdad, to make it short, for years. And actually, I didn't know why I'm like fascinated with Baghdad, with particular stories to tell and archival research to include, until last 4 months. I didn't write anything last 4 months, but I feel as if what I'm doing has a new meaning to me, and I can't explain it to myself. So I have much better energy actually to work on this book when I go back to writing, I assume, because of whatever going on. So this event, if it's one event, and to make it short, is really impacting us in so many ways. Yeah.
I want to thank you for that, the statement in the beginning, because I think there's a whole other conversation that we didn't manage to have about what our responsibilities are here. Just because of US and Canadian and European and kind of Western funding of this genocide. And what does it mean to be a person from the Arab diaspora here? I mean, in a lot of the conversations that I've been having with close friends of mine, there's been very much a feeling like, what are we doing here? Why are we here? Should we not be here? Should we go back?
And
what does
where
it
to
mean
go?
to go back? Where to go?
This is a new question.
Where to go?
Yeah, I mean, I sat with a group of Arabs, all of whom were like, I think Beirut might be still okay. No, Beirut is no good. Beirut is, come to Cairo. I think Amman, we could do Amman. I mean, these are people from all over the place, and they're just like, what is left that we could run to? Yeah. You know, but there's very much I feel very keenly the responsibilities towards the brain drain that I've contributed to. You know, I studied in Canada, and then I went back to Egypt and taught there, and it was extremely fulfilling, even if there were other problems. And then recently I moved to Toronto to teach there, and it was a really hard decision, and then as soon as I arrived, all of this started, and I was like, is God trying to tell me something? You know? So I don't know, but anyways, maybe we can continue this conversation afterwards. I'd be curious to hear what people are thinking.
Likewise.
Yeah, and I'm working on a new novel about, it's sort of sexual assault and the role of institutions and something like that.
Well, I just want to thank you both again. Just another round of applause for our amazing, very rigorous, thoughtful conversations, given the constraints, and again, inshallah, very much more soon. And thank you all so much. Stay tuned for updates from Mizna. We'll be opening a new reading submission series soon. We'll be responding to our most recent one soon. We've been publishing great work online. Noor Hussein, our editor, has been translating a lot of work for us online from Gaza. We have Abdul Rahman Al-Gendi. His piece is coming out very soon. Sara Aziza, who's not in the room, has translated a letter of hers cousins from Gaza right now that we're going to be running this week as well. Yeah, I mean, free Palestine, land back, everything. Like, seriously, thank you all for the love y'all have shown Mizna and Rawi despite these institutions. Seriously, I cannot thank you all enough. And let's end with that exact response Lena put into the space of, Where are our responsibilities? I think that's something I want. If you didn't take anything from this, I mean, I think that's a question I want everyone in the room, myself included, because I know that's what I'm going to be asking myself. What are our responsibilities, and what are the time scales of solidarity building, of nurturing solidarity? Yeah, and we can do these things together, but thank you all so much.